Potato gnocchi can be quite a challenge for a lot of cooks, but I'm here to help. Let me walk you through the steps that I take to get soft, pillowy gnocchi, which include 4 golden rules that I always follow when making these magical little dumplings. And at the end of the video, I'll prepare a simple dish with them that you can cook for your friends and family. The first step is actually my first golden rule, and that's to bake your potatoes, don't boil them. Flour and water can create gluten, right? So if you add additional moisture into your dough by boiling the potatoes, you're gonna have to add more flour too. And that's just gonna create a greater opportunity for gluten formation. So bake your potatoes and don't introduce additional water into your dough. All right, start by preheating your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Then poke each potato all over with a knife or fork. This is gonna help some additional moisture escape each potato as they bake. Now place the potatoes directly on the middle rack instead of on a pan. This is going to eliminate that overcooked brown spot that can form on the bottom of each potato if you went the pan route. You could also rest the potatoes on a bed of salt, on a sheet pan, and that'll have the same effect, but I never do this because it just seems like a waste of salt. Just thought I'd provide another option for you because, it's nice to have choices. Bake the potatoes for about an hour until they're totally cooked through. The skin should be slightly crispy, but the inside should be nice and tender. After a minute or so of rest, the skins will soften up too, and the entire potato shouldn't resist if you give it a few gentle squeezes. Cut them in half lengthwise so more steam and moisture can escape, and then let the potatoes rest for a few minutes to cool down enough so that you can handle them. Grab a large bowl and use a spoon to scoop out as much of the flesh from inside the potatoes as possible. And for what it's worth, I've determined that on average, you get about a 62 to 65% yield by weight of usable cooked potato. Now use a potato ricer or the fine die on a food mill to rice the cooked potato. Some recipes suggest that passing the potatoes through a strainer or a tammy will work, but I've tried that a few times and I think that it releases way too much starch from the potatoes, and this can lead to terribly chewy gnocchi, so I would not suggest this option at all. When done, the end result should look like dry, potatoey snowflakes, and your final yield should give you just enough potato for this recipe with a little to spare. This brings us to golden rule number 2. So for every pound of cooked riced potato, use 3 3/4 ounces of all-purpose flour and 1 egg. Now, without a doubt, you're gonna find conflicting information on the internet. I get it, let's be honest, there's a million gnocchi recipes out there. Some of them are fantastic, some of them probably suck. But this ratio consistently gives me soft, pillowy gnocchi every single time. And if you're one of those folks that insists that gnocchi be made without eggs, I got you covered. Check out the recipe link above. Now, spread the potato out onto your counter in an even layer. Then season it all over with a half teaspoon of fine sea salt and a dusting of some freshly ground nutmeg. Add about a 1/4 cup of finely grated Parmesan cheese, then grab the all-purpose flour and carefully sift or sprinkle it onto the potatoes. Finally, drizzle the egg on top of everything. Now make sure the egg is whisked and at room temperature when you do it. That'll make it a lot easier to pour. Okay, golden rule number 3, use a bench scraper to mix the ingredients together. If you don't have one, I highly recommend you pick one up. If that's not in the cards right now, use something with a flat edge, maybe a chef's knife or a spatula, just something that you can use to fold the ingredients together. Using this tool with this technique evenly incorporates the ingredients without overworking the dough, which is super important when your goal is light, pillowy gnocchi. After a few minutes of folding, ditch that scraper and use your hands to push the mixture around a bit. Knead the dough ever so slightly until a cohesive mass is formed. This shouldn't take any more than 30 seconds to a minute tops, and it's totally okay if you still see some streaks of egg yolk in the dough here and there. Golden rule number 4, once that dough is formed, work quickly. Every minute that dough rests is another minute for the flour and the moisture in your dough to form gluten. So have a pot of boiling, simmering water at the ready and start forming your little gnocchi. This dough is slightly tacky, so make sure to flour your work surface before you roll out any gnocchi. Now cut off a piece of dough and cover the rest with a damp cloth, which will keep it from forming a skin. Using gentle pressure, roll the smaller piece out into a rope about a 1/2 inch in diameter. Then cut it into 3/4 inch size pieces. Definitely take note that the gnocchi will expand when you cook them, so don't cut them much larger than this. If anything, you can always go just a hair smaller. Your gnocchi should be soft and tender to the touch, and they should be fairly even textured all the way through. If the dough still seems too tacky, just dust everything with a little bit more flour while you're creating your dumplings. One trick to speed up the process is to roll out a bunch of lengths of dough, then line them up side by side and cut gnocchi in bulk. I can usually roll out and cut an entire batch in about 5 minutes using this method. Make sure all of the gnocchi have a thin dusting of flour on them. Then transfer the dumplings to a sheet pan that's been floured or lined with parchment paper, or both like I've done here. Grab the sheet pan and proceed to your stove. Oh, and make sure the gnocchi are all in a single layer or you're gonna run the risk of them sticking to each other. If you haven't seasoned the water yet, do it now. If you're wondering how much salt to add, I typically use about 2 tablespoons of kosher salt per gallon of water. Work in a few batches and add some of the gnocchi to the pot of simmering water. Now keep the water at a slow simmer and let the gnocchi cook for about a minute. When they're done, the gnocchi will float to the surface. At this point, you can strain them out and sauce the gnocchi right away. This is going to give you the lightest and pillowiest texture, but you know what? I go a different route. One that sacrifices just a smidge of texture for some toasty goodness. When the gnocchi float to the surface, strain them, then place the dumplings on a sheet pan and refrigerate them until they're totally chilled. Add a knob of butter to a saute pan and place it over medium heat. When the butter starts to sizzle, add a portion of the gnocchi. Saute the gnocchi over medium to medium-high heat for 2 or 3 minutes, shaking the pan occasionally just to make sure that the dumplings get toasty and lightly brown on most of their sides. Be very careful not to burn the butter here. Do that, and you'll have to start all over. Now, hit the pan with some brown chicken stock. Add about 1/3 cup to start. Then grate some Parmesan cheese on top. Give the pan a quick swirl to incorporate the ingredients, then mount the gnocchi with some additional butter. Cut the heat and start swirling the pan again. Now, this will melt the butter and emulsify everything together to form the sauce. If it seems too tight, you can always add a bit more chicken stock to loosen the sauce up a bit. This is totally optional, but I happen to have some white truffle oil hanging around, so I'm going to add a little drizzle. Check the seasoning and the consistency of the sauce, then it's time to plate. The sauce will tighten up the longer the gnocchi sit, so you'll want to serve this dish as soon as you've cooked it. Now grab a bowl and start spooning the gnocchi into a pile, finishing with any of the remaining sauce in the pan. Finish the gnocchi off with some additional Parmesan cheese and some freshly ground black pepper. And there you have it, light, pillowy potato gnocchi made entirely from scratch and a simple preparation to boot. Like I said before, give this gnocchi recipe a try. I promise it'll work for you. I really do. And if you have questions about anything, about the technique or the ingredients that I used, the name of my first dog, just hit me in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thanks so much. I'll catch you next time.